Hello and welcome to the Reflecting Light Show. I am your host, April Rodgers, and guess who I have in the studio with me today? It is my husband, Adams Rodgers. Every single time we get on and we talk about things with our guests, they all reference you. So I thought, well, it's high time that I have my man on the show, and it's our anniversary. So happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary, sweetheart.
I'm so glad that you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
21 years.
21 years.
Yeah, you've been putting up with me for 21 years. That's a long time.
I think it's the other way around, but we'll go with it for sure.
So today on the show, we're going to keep this pretty light and simple, but I want us just to talk about marriage and best practices and what we've learned over 21 years, because we have endured some pretty big hardships, but we have had some pretty amazing victories as well. God has been faithful through it all. And I remember one particular sermon that we heard, and this was some of the best marriage advice that we had been given, and it was simply to enjoy the peaks and to survive the pits.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. There's no doubt. True. I think that alongside getting that illustration that time at camp.
Yeah, yeah.
Where the triangle.
Yeah,
where
talk about that a little bit.
It was explained to us that if we put the Lord at the top of the triangle, and if you and I are in both of the bottom corners, if we work our way always towards the things of God, that ultimately in our pursuit of Him individually brings us closer naturally to each other.
Right.
And that simple visual really helped in the pits where you go, okay, what are we focused on? What are we really trying to put our sights on? Right. Just like Colossians, set your mind to the things above. Well, that was just a pretty good way to take a deep thing of God, make it real simple, so you have something to kind of anchor to when you're in the pits. Because when you're in the pits, you're not...
You don't see it like that.
No, you don't see it like that. You don't see it. You see it in hindsight, and I think that's great. Just kind of like going through your testimony. You see the full scope of God's faithfulness across both the high ridges, but the valleys as well.
That's right. As you're sitting here talking, it's making me think about, we were not even married for a week. Well, that's not true. We had our honeymoon.
Yeah.
And then we go back to Phoenix, Arizona to pack everything up.
Yep.
So you're packing up your apartment, I'm packing up my apartment. We're about to drive across the country to Louisiana to start our new life together.
That's right.
And we had a little pit right there.
A pit out of the gate.
Because Adams did not want to bring all of my stuff back too. So I was hard-headed. I made us get 2 U-Hauls, and we drove 2 U-Hauls from Phoenix, Arizona to Monroe, Louisiana. Not our finest moment.
Well, I'm appreciative you took that angle, because I felt like when I look back, it was clear that I was the hard-headed one, because we had gotten a large one. We gotten one that we had thought would pack up your entire apartment and my entire apartment, and it would all fit. And then we would drive one car, and then we would tow one car back. And we got in that last critical square feet, and there was a couch. Yeah. I want to say it was and it was ugly as sin, but it'd been around a long time. I think it's still in
my parents' trailer.
No, it was beautiful. It's the most beautiful couch that I'd ever seen in my life. But it came down to this like 1 or 2 pieces.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, let's just give that thing up. Right. And you were thinking generously about how you could bring it back home and perhaps give it to Julia or even Jeremy or something. But instead, we got a whole other vehicle that we could drive and tow another car all the way back.
Thank goodness for your grandparents who had a wonderful marriage. They had been married several years. And
decades and decades.
Yeah, and so Nora rode with me and Leroy rode with you. I think we started talking again, probably like Fort Worth. Maybe.
Yeah, it was close. Yeah. It was close to about halfway home, and it all worked out. But you're right, a pit. And I think not to jump to the end, but I think the message that we heard here a while back, where Pastor Tom made the statement that pride is the disease that affects everybody except the one who actually has it.
Yeah.
And that to me is just that aha moment, is that's the thing that will hurt any relationship, but especially a marriage.
That's true.
It's definitely part of the pits.
That's right.
Because pits come when you have things that happen around you that you don't get to say so. Something happens and you're now in the fight, and you didn't ask for the fight, but you're no less in it. Some of the pits come when you're more important, when you esteem yourself higher than others. And James was really clear about there's a cost to that.
That's right.
And the cost could be a pit.
Yeah.
And I just think that really, when I step back and I think all of the boneheaded things that I have done that allowed us to get in a pit here or there, it's all come out of
Pride.
what was I really positioned to think. And it's usually pride.
I think that about myself too, because in my helpful advisor self, I know this about myself, I like to be the helpful advisor, and I like for everyone to take my advice, but I don't necessarily like to receive advice. That pride is an issue with that. And so I have to check myself on it and make sure that I'm not walking down that path, but I can receive, because that's what marriage is about. It's that two-way street, and we're better together than we are apart. So that's one of the things that I think that the Lord has taught me, and He's still teaching me day in and day out.
I'm big on analogies, or illustrations, and another one that's really, I think, helped us starting with where it needed to start all those years ago was, I think we get taught in life from a societal standpoint that marriage is about a middle. It's about, if you thought about something to the idea of a tennis court, and you're on a baseline and your spouse is on a baseline and the net's in the middle. And as long as you're willing to come up to the net and the other person's willing to come up to the net, it's 50-50 and everything should work out. I'll give all that I can to the net, you give all that you can to the net, and at some point it just averages out nicely. And I felt like at some point, and perhaps like all pits, that's where all the teaching goes. I heard one time somebody say, why is it rich in valleys? It's because that's where all the manure ends up. So it's pretty rich down there.
That's funny.
But the whole idea is, no, in one of those pits, it kind of just, I don't know about revelation, but it just, the whole idea became a little bit clearer and a little bit different, which was very helpful, which was, no, the idea of marriage is you go to the other person's baseline.
Yeah.
And they got to be willing to go all the way over to the other baseline. And over time, you'll end up somewhere in the middle.
That's right.
But until you're willing to go further than you think you should, to a degree greater than was expected, you'll never really achieve that sacrificial average, if you will, where God probably wants you to be more often.
That's true. And I think about that early on in our marriage, that I was guilty of keeping score. And it was like, well, if I did this for you, then I expected you to do this for me. And if you didn't, then all of a sudden you were operating in this deficit and you didn't even know you were operating in it. And I think that over time that has gotten better, where we can go all the way to the baseline, and it's not just like we're at the net volleying it back and forth to each other. No, like we're willing to go the extra mile, because there's been some pretty significant challenges on both of our parts where you had to carry me through some really dark and hard times. And vice versa.
100%.
With your back surgeries and different things that you've experienced, and me with the loss and of Jeremy, and then 3 years of infertility. And sometimes we just had to rely on each other just to carry each other through.
That's right. Well, and it's important, I think, and this has been helpful for us, is to go through all the various types of pits. Sometimes there's pits that have come our way that actually drew us together. Now, the enemy loves to needle in and try to cause division, even though a circumstance, let's call it an external circumstance, let's specifically talk about Jeremy's passing.
Okay.
That is something that happened outside of our marriage and just the simple form of
Right.
our marriage. And it had the ability to throw us in together, but because people grieve differently. It was your first time. It was not my second time, but in a sense, I'd lived through something very, very similar. So naturally, man versus woman grief, just wiring, you got all that complexity. So that's something that happened on the outside per se that could have done this, but the enemy just being so vigilant and trying to cause even further damage as his whole mission to the family. We had to kind of stop and say, okay, we need to come together on this and really come in. That's one pit. Then there's the pit of pride, or there's where you're going through something that I'm not.
Yeah.
And then how can I wisely submit myself and humble myself to meet you exactly where you are, just like with all the back surgeries.
Yes.
That's a pit that started with me, but you're right there in the middle of it. And how do you see it and humble yourself and submit yourself to where I am, which is in a really rough spot, and then not let the enemy cause further calamity or damage by ripping us apart instead of coming together.
And I think, honestly, we just received healing from that at the marriage retreat.
Yeah.
Whenever we were talking about, you had such physical pain, and it was awful and excruciating to watch you go through that.
It's bad.
And then I had the pride that came in, because I remember I kept saying, well, I kept him alive, and I did this. No, I didn't. God kept you alive. God did that. And I had to come to that point where I had to lay all that down, all that selfishness and all the pride that was coming in. And you had to lay yours down too. And I remember that being a sweet time of healing whenever we just said, you know what, it was selfishness on both of our parts.
Yeah.
And
especially, and I said that, like, yeah. It's not the way it's supposed to come out. Yes, I was thinking about the revelation that I had, the healing part, the selfishness on my part, because then all of a sudden, God did that miraculous thing in restoring me in this microwave amount of time right after the climax, because I did a fasting thing, and I didn't tell anybody you were out of town.
Yeah.
And I started this incredible, it's the most dynamic fasting thing that I've ever done. You and the girls were out of town, and it just I went to a level, and it was amazing what happened. And then all of a sudden, God does this miraculous thing in a 2-week period that almost was like I never had back surgery. And that's hard to imagine, knowing after 4 and how difficult all of them have been, and the last 2, is so close together back in 19. And to think 2 weeks later, I feel like as if I've never had any back problems. I mean, it's kind of weird to say it. It's exactly the way it was. And then I'm like, okay, everybody get on board. Everything's great. Here we go. And you're like, whoa, wait a second. We have just been drugged backwards through the muck and the mire for 6-7 months of just scary stuff.
Yes.
Like, it was in a scary place.
It was.
And then and that was so selfish to just go, okay, why isn't everybody just in this great spot? I am, let's go. I mean, I brought you here, so sorry, let's go. And just having a moment to reflect and go, hey, wait a second.
Yeah.
We don't grieve in it the same way. We probably don't grieve out of it the same way.
That's right.
And you've said this a bunch of times. We got to give ourselves grace, but we got to give everybody else around us grace too.
That's right.
And again, isn't that the antidote to pride? I mean,
yeah, that's right.
And
I think about the fact of you having to be a male and to want to fix things for me, and probably seeing me walk through seasons of darkness was tough, just as a fixer, as somebody who wants to do that. And I was talking to a group of men. I was telling them about that season of life, about how you couldn't fix me, but you just loved me through it. And you weren't my Savior, but you pointed me to my Savior, which I think is a big distinction. And I think that people need to hear that are maybe just embarking on marriage, and maybe they have something that they're walking through that's really hard, and then they need to know, like, some things are unfixable that your wife's going to walk through or your husband's going to walk through.
Right, 100%.
But just loving them through that time period and not trying to be the Savior, but pointing them to the Savior makes all the difference in the world.
I can remember early on, and it's all the things, right? It's all the little things that you can pick up and I think it has to be a biblically based whatever you're listening to. It has to be Spirit-led, whether that's a teaching or instruction or a sermon. I think that's, as we all know, it's the foundation of everything. But I can remember early on stopping and going, am I gonna listen and help, or am I just gonna listen?
Right.
And you had to start doing that because the natural response was, okay, I hear a problem, here's a solution, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, and this is how, and all of a sudden you're like, TV time, like, hey, hang on, pal. I just needed you to listen. And this is just the way of working through something. And so for a while there, to kind of lessen the stumbles, it was like, is this an and or an or? Am I going to listen and help, or just listen? And then you'd go, this is just a listen. And I'd go, okay, that's great.
That's good. Well, we've talked a lot about the pits, and we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, let's talk about some of the peaks that we've had.
Let's do it.
We would like to thank today's sponsor of the Reflecting Light Show, the Warehouse #1 restaurant. The Warehouse has been known for its great food and service since 1980. Situated at the foot of Olive Street, this restaurant overlooks the picturesque Ouachita River. They are open Monday through Friday for lunch and dinner, and Saturday for dinner only. Stop by today for some mouth-watering hush puppies, and perhaps you might even want to celebrate your anniversary there. Hello and welcome back to the Reflecting Light Show. We are here with the special anniversary edition with my husband, Adams. We're talking about our favorite memories of marriage over the past 21 years, how we have survived some significant pits. But now let's talk about some of the peaks and what the Lord has done for us on the mountaintop, because He has done some amazing things for us.
Yes.
One of the major things that I think about is giving us our two daughters, and how I just put us through the ringer trying to get those two girls here. But you were such a supportive husband. 3 years of infertility. We had to walk through that, but the Lord gave us the desires of our heart, and not once, but He did it twice. We got two girls, and now we have teenagers in the home.
Be careful what you ask for.
But then I also think about the fact of you stepping into your role as a spiritual leader for us. And that was about 11 years ago that the Lord had you go on a spiritual retreat. And whenever you came home, I was like, something is different about him. He is completely different. What did they do at that retreat? I need to know. And you were like,
can't tell you.
I'm not going to say anything.
That's right.
You're going to go experience it on your own. And what the Lord did for you was He made you come back and serve me well and love me well. And it had this beautiful trickle-down effect into our marriage, into our girls' lives. So it not only changed your life, but it changed my life, and it changed Addie and Ella's life. So let's talk a little bit about how the Lord did that for you, and what kind of hope can you offer men who are wanting to be the spiritual leader in their home?
That's great. So about 11 years ago, got a chance to go on, and I didn't know what I was getting into, because it's incredible, but you get no information on the front end. You truly go to these things at the confidence of whoever invited you is where you go. And I went into that already a believer. It wasn't this transformative, which happens beautifully as well. But I just went to kind of go because it seemed like the next spiritual thing that you would want to do. But really what happened, it was the first time my ears heard about the role of a man spiritually in the house, and that happened to be part of it. I'd gotten an experience as far as just as a believer and grew in knowledge, but in the specific area of leading in your home, I don't know, for whatever reason, again, perhaps pride, it seems to be the common denominator. I just wasn't getting that, but that really came to light in that retreat. And the first thing that I did when I came home, and this is, you said give advice, is I washed your feet. That's the first thing that I did. And as easy as that should have been, it was still awkward. I mean, isn't that interesting? It was that experience. And I think that is what helped me hurdle that first, hey, wait, there's something to this. It's bigger than just setting rules or casting a direction. It's so much more than that. And I think it started with that physical submission, just like Jesus did right out of the gate. Said, I may be responsible for leading, and that burden may fall directly on my shoulders, and I'll take up the mantle. But it starts from a servant's position, and that physical activity helped shift my mentality at the same time. So I think that's where it kind of starts, or it started when I go back and look.
Right. And that's interesting because we haven't even discussed that part of it before. But you're right, it does. And I think that us having girls, it was one of those things where I was the stay-at-home mom, so I was already caring for them on a physical basis and an emotional basis, and so the spiritual was falling on me as well.
That's right.
And after you came home, I remember all that shifting, and you said, not anymore. Like, I'm going to take the ownership to be the spiritual leader.
That's right.
In our home, and you really did the hard things, and you dug into the Word like never before.
That's right.
And you allowed yourself to be transformed, which in retrospect now I see it like it transformed me, and it started to transform the girls into who they are. So thank you for that. Thank you for being submissive and allowing the Lord to work in and through you.
That's right.
And now He's provided some really great peaks because of that.
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
I think that word submission just gets used inappropriately and inaccurately.
Yeah.
And we don't see it as a position of strength. You know, we sing songs about it.
Right.
You know, I'll fight on my knees. And it sounds good and it feels good because it is good. But when it comes down to doing it, sometimes we see it poorly. And there's no stronger position than to surrender. Because I think the truth of the word, that it's in our weakness that it says He's made strong. It's not in our strength He's made stronger. It's in that weakness. And I think that's what surrendering and being submissive to a call can really do.
That's good.
And it just reminds me, in light of you saying what are some tips, if you will, is just try your best to remain teachable. Yes. And again, that teachable spirit's going to bump heads with pride. Mm-hmm. It will, especially if He allows you a little success in some areas. Yeah. Spiritually speaking, you'll get a little bit bigger for your britches, and so you got to really take captive that and really, again, turn that back over. But just having a teachable spirit.
That's right. Just
learning that, wow, I'm kind of missing it. And I agree with you. You were 100%, even though I'd been a believer for years.
Yeah.
Years. Not a long time,
years,
but enough time to go, wait a second, you were leading our house spiritually. And then when that just hit me as a ton of bricks, wait a second, I've got something. Which is another lesson we try to teach the girls all the time. Just never never let go of a teachable spirit.
Yes.
It'll take you tremendous places.
That's right. And I think that for you and I, one of the things that I love about our relationship is communication.
Yeah.
And I'm a talker. I like to talk, of course. But just how the Lord has allowed us to be friends.
Yeah.
And I want to hear about what's going on in your business. I want to know, how can I be praying for you? What's happening? You know the things that I'm dreaming up at Reflecting Light.
That's right.
And we're able to dream together. And I remember going on those dates all those years ago, and we just would dream.
That's right.
Dream, And so now, 21 years in, we're still dreaming, still believing God for big things.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Thinking about the future is wonderful when I think about it with you by my side.
Okay. All right. Well, and again, I think that I think having that triangle always in focus, because we've come through a pit in recent years, and we're experienced enough now to know that probably is not the last one.
Right.
And to know that you can go in it together.
That's right.
And you can use that as an incubator to strengthen your marriage and not let it, harm it unnecessarily, because we're focused on the same thing. We're not focused on each other. We're focused on the Lord, and knowing and trusting that will ultimately bring us together. Is how the next ridge line is going to get traversed. I mean,
That's
because
right.
the pits are fair.
You got to survive.
They
them.
happen to
You got to survive.
You got to survive them. They happen to everybody. It's kind of what you're going to do, and I think that's something that the Lord allowed through that moment that began the fast, was just fighting for the first time, and it's weird to say that, because I think it's a peak. Mm-hmm. And it's a success because it then had a trickle-down effect, to fight from a position of strength versus a position of weakness.
Right.
To yell at the enemy.
Yeah, and not
and
fight
not
each other.
at God, not yell at you, but yell with the Lord.
Yes.
Get out of His way instead of in front of Him, because we want to fix it or we think that we can do it. But to get behind Him and let Him truly be that shield, and then to do that way together was life-changing.
And remembering that we do not battle against flesh and blood, and so when you and I aren't seeing eye to eye on something, then we realize that it is the enemy, and that we can fight him. And so that was perfectly said. Don't get in front of God. Get with Him. Allow Him to do it for us.
That's right.
It's a lot of good advice right there. Well, our time is almost up. Can you believe that? It went by so fast.
It's gone by tremendously fast.
So tell me, honey, what is one thing that is lightening your load these days?
Out of all the shows that I've watched, and I know this question's coming.
Yeah.
It's always a little bit hard because there's so many things, but in this very moment, I'll just say that having good health reports for us is lightening my load.
That's right. Yeah. The Lord allowing us to stay healthy, and then we can do this life together.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
One foot in front of the other. Hopefully we're not messing up our kids too badly.
We are. I'm pretty sure we are. Just hopefully it's not too badly, like you said.
Yes. Well, thank you for being my guest. Thank you for being my man. Thank you for loving me well. Thank you for the past 21 years. I can't wait for another 21, then another 21. I love you.
I love you. Thank you for allowing me to marry up.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to the Reflecting Light Show. We pray you got some hope and some light out of today's episode. And if you did, please subscribe to the show and also share with a friend who may need the light of Jesus Christ in his or her life. If you haven't gotten your copy of Made to Shine, you can do so by going to aprilrodgers.com. Go out and have a great week and be the light.